Yeah, I was gonna say, do you ever have that? Have you ever streamed like on YouTube, like on live?
Yeah, that's where I started streaming.
Oh, okay, okay, nice. I was gonna say because it always seems like I'll hit start stream and then it'll be delayed for quite a bit, but I don't seem to have that same kind of problem with like Twitch
You
and
don't have the
whatnot.
like ultra low latency option?
Yeah, and I usually rock with that, but it just seems even more so with YouTube. It just seems like there's that delay when it first starts up. But then yeah, later on it's not too bad, but all
Hmm.
right. So whew, this is going to be fun. This is going to be fun. Hello everybody and everybody coming in. I brought along a special guest that I know you guys are excited to get to talk to, and I can definitely say that I am in that same boat. The one and only Hey Jay. Hello, hello.
Hello, Handy Tips. Thank you for having me here.
So, first off, let me ask you guys in the chat, how is both of our audio? How is Jay's audio? How is mine? Too high, too low? How are we feeling with that?
This is your first live YouTube stream, is that correct?
Correct.
Was I
Like,
was I allowed to say that out loud and call you out on that? I
yeah.
apologize. I should I
No,
just
no,
realized.
no.
Uh-oh.
No. Absolutely fine. Absolutely fine. So I guess basically, I mean, we can definitely start off where, we have that mutual connection to where we both are avid lovers of Monster Hunter. I know that you had a bit of a different start. So I would like to ask you, what was it that deterred you from Monster Hunter at first? Because if people didn't know, you kind of weren't feeling it at first, and then once you gave it some more time, you really started to kind of like fall in love with it. What was it that kind of you didn't enjoy as much as at first?
Yeah, there's been quite a bit of a character arc. I don't think we would have gone along very well a year ago if you asked to chat with me. Um, for anyone who's watched the journals, Monster Hunter, from what I've learned, is a game. It sounds like a lot of people actually don't like Monster Hunter when they first try it, and that
Right.
was my initial impression. I used to work at Nintendo and well, not work, quote unquote. I used to contribute at NintendoEnthusiast.com, very much an avid Nintendo fan site,
Okay.
and the community there was made of veteran Monster Hunter fans. So that was like my first initiation to the Monster Hunter community. And these guys were like super hardcore about Monster Hunter and they loved it. And they talked about it in such great passion. I actually went out and bought Monster Hunter Try Ultimate, I think, for the Wii U.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
I was like, these guys sound like they're having so much fun with this. They're rating the games like really high. I got to understand what this is. So I bought it. I played it for about an hour and I was like, this is so bad. I hate it. From everything from just moving to, I think like you had to, and this is many years ago, so I might be remembering wrong, but you had to like connect online at one point or something, or maybe it just said like you have to do an online, but it wasn't really online. I don't know. Um, but there was like an online connection that turned me off completely. The movement turned me off, the load screens, and I was like, I don't see this working. So I returned it for to GameStop for or EB Games for a refund.
Okay. So
And that was it. I'm like, Monster Hunter is not for me. Um, Fast forward a few years, still at Nintendo Enthusiasts. And I really hate saying this story out loud because people are actually probably going to get mad at me. But I'm at the point where now Nintendo is sending me and the team review copies. And so I got a review copy of Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate or the
yeah.
one on the
Yep.
3DS. I was like, oh boy, here we go again. So everybody was talking about Monster Hunter 4. There was more hype around it. More like reviewers were praising it. And I like booted up. I tried it. I was like, oh, it's still clunky. It's still
Uh-huh.
slow.
Yeah.
Um, I honestly don't remember what I did with that copy. All I know is I don't own it. So I either gave it to someone or traded it away, which if I traded away, I think that's what I did. And people are like, you did what? For a free game?
Yeah,
Um,
I was gonna say because like from try to for you, I don't feel like there was that much of a difference to where if somebody played try and didn't like it, there wasn't really anything in for you that was really going to sell you outside of maybe mounting was introduced in for you, so maybe that. But believe me, I get it. I can see why you still weren't so much into it.
And plus, I'm not that big into handheld gaming, so
Same,
the
same.
fact that it was on the 3DS didn't help it anymore. So, you know, as an outsider, I kept seeing the genre, the franchise Monster Hunter only grow in infamy. Like, I remember, I think it was Monster Hunter World. I was at a PAX in Boston, and they had this gigantic booth. It might have been the Monster Hunter 4 because I remember there was actually a lot of 3DS. But I saw the Monster Hunter World booth at E3, whenever that came out, and I saw the hype, and I was like, "Yeah, it looks cool, but I've already checked out of this franchise. This isn't for
Right,
me." But I could still tell that this was getting more and more popular. And finally, Monster Hunter Rise came out, and it was kind of advertised on the whole wire bugs and writing your Palamute, and it just looked faster. And it looked at this point that Monster Hunter Fever is like higher than ever. And I'm like, okay, I think it's time. There's a free demo. It's time to try this out.
right.
Let's see what it's about. And I'm also in my content, I was getting to the point of just trying demos, streaming them, and then reviewing them. And so I spent a good couple of hours on Monster Hunter Rise, the most I had spent on any Monster Hunter game. And I tried different weapons, but again, I was not surrounded by the community. This was just me and some my viewers who were also not very much into Monster Hunter. And I
Gotcha.
was trying weapons, and I'm like, oh my god, I have to like, how do I target a monster? What are all
Mm-hmm.
these like items I have to cycle through?
Right.
And I tried with, I think I tried a long sword, the great sword, and the bow, and everything just
Yeah.
did not click. And so I put out a video in January, and I was ranting on the demo of like what I didn't like about it. Um, and I got so much. That's the video that went viral, where the Monster Hunter community discovered me, and they were like, "This is a valid criticism of as a newcomer, but have you looked at your hunter's notes? Have you done that?" And
Right,
this is
right.
where like I got so much feedback thrown at me. Um, this is a very long story to answer your question. I
Oh, no, no,
apologize.
no.
It
It's
can be
all
a
good.
little.
It's all good. Go for it.
All right. So at this point, I was so checked out of Monster Hunter. Like, I made a follow-up video of like, cool, I met the community, awesome community, and a lot of people were like really trying to encourage me to pick it up with the new advice. And I was like, I really don't like this game. I don't want to do it. I don't want to invest playing this. And finally, I was like, I have now two videos that went viral. I have thousands of Monster Hunter fans watching me and giving me advice. And a lot of them, the big takeaway I got from that was a lot of them talked about having a veteran help them. And I'm
Right.
like, well, I'm in this really great position where I have thousands of veterans right now offering me advice for free. So I was like, let's really give this franchise a chance. I have the community here. I have a channel. I have all this. Let's do this pledge thing. And I pledged to play Monster Hunter World because that was the one I had heard was the most accessible and like epic. Actually, it was because I heard it was accessible. And I was like, let's
Right.
try this. I heard it's 30 hours. I'm just going to play till the credits. Very like minimal um, commitment. I think I can do this, especially with like all these people helping me. And we'll see how far we get. So when I made that pledge, I was like, oh, I'm going to be streaming a game I don't like for the next couple months.
Oh, boy.
Uh, but luckily, the first stream went so well. I don't know what was different. If it's just because, well, the demos are designed for veteran players to show new mechanics, first of all. But Monster Hunter World did such a good job as a tutorial game to kind of hold my hand and teach me. And the fact that I had the veterans and the community helping me did so much to kind of tear away the intimidation of the menus. And like
Right.
I say intimidation of the menus because actually my second stream was unscheduled. I did it on a Saturday. And I just spent 3 hours. I'm like, I'm just gonna pull up menus and we're just gonna absorb what is all this information? What
Right.
is all in the menu? And yeah, from there, I never looked back because it only got more and more addictive. It only clicked more and more. And now
Exactly.
here we are 6 months later, and I just killed a black dragon and I
Yes.
got the biggest rush of my life in gaming.
Seriously. And see, that's the thing is that what I try to tell people a lot of the time, because I know that there's been community members of mine that have said, I want blank to get involved in a Monster Hunter so we can play together. You don't want to try and force people into Monster Hunter. They have to take it at their pace because it's one of those things that like it might not click at first, but when it does, it absolutely clicks. And like it's a perfect story, exactly what you were just saying. Your story is absolutely perfect as to how you should approach Monster Hunter, you know, how you said the veterans helping you and how people said that a veteran helped them. Perfect way of going about it, because once you do get into Monster Hunter, man, it's so different from any other gaming community. The franchise itself is just so different in as far as like being consumer friendly and just you know, just taking into consideration what their fan base enjoys and the staples that they love, like how they bring back Fatalis in so many different games. It's because he's such a crazy hard fight and so many people love him, and just having that wherewithal and the awareness, you don't really see that a lot in different franchises. And I can't say enough and praise the Monster Hunter franchise enough, honestly.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you're in it, I think we all understand that rush of a challenge and a monster.
Hmm.
I think the fact that, I can still fairly clearly remember how I was um, seeing the franchise 6 months ago, and it was intimidating. It's just so
Yes.
intimidating when you are thrown into it. I even remember on stream, my first few streams, I was constantly asking questions to the chat of like, what does this mean? What do I do here? What is all this?
Hmm.
Um, and I've never, I've played hundreds, thousands of games, and I've never felt so overwhelmed. And oftentimes that overwhelmingness is what turns me off from games. And so I think it's hard for a veteran to remember, especially if you've been in the franchise for a long time, to remember what it's like to see Monster Hunter for the first time, because it's very intimidating. Now that like what all the mechanics do and you know what all the menus and where to find everything, like it's super fluid. Like I'm at the point too where I'm not intimidated by it. But when I try to like talk to someone new about it, it's like, oh boy, you have so much to go through. How do we do this without a community, right? And
Right.
I think it's very hard. And I think that appeals to, it's a very niche audience. Like if you are not surrounded by someone, to boot up a game that you don't know and a franchise you don't know, and to take that time to do all that research yourself, I think that is a very specific type of gamer that will enjoy that.
Right. Right. So I know that you were talking about how you just slayed a black dragon. So
Mhm.
I kind of want to talk about that experience. So as far as, you know, taking on Alatreon and everything, what do you think of the fight overall? And I guess because I know that you said it was one of the most exhilarating feelings you've had in gaming. I kind of
Yeah.
want you to kind of describe that as well.
Sure, you're getting a bit of a I just finished recording my journal where I actually
Oh,
describe it
okay.
in very much detail. It's going to be out later this week.
So
Um,
keep an eye out for that, people.
yeah, that'll be dropping. But I have to say, Alatreon, when you look at it in the context of all the monsters in World and Iceborne, um, I've never looked at that fight and said this is cheap or this is bullshit. I
Right,
always use the
right,
word bullshit whenever I'm like this is dumb.
right, right,
Alatreon, I've never like if you watch me fight Rajang, you hear bullshit a lot on that fight because
right.
God, I
Sounds
hate that
about
mic.
right. That sounds about right.
Because I always love to compare them because Rajang I think is a very hard fight and Alatreon's a very hard fight. And they both have the openings, but I just find Rajang is so dialed up in speed and intensity that the opening is so small. Whereas, Alatreon is fast, but there are those openings that you can learn eventually. And at no point does it feel unfair. I feel it's a lot more generous in it's like, here's an opening, but you as the player need to learn what those openings are and just like all the fights. But
Right.
I just feel Alatreon is built
The perfect
um,
example of
it's well
that.
balanced.
Hmm.
Like Rajang feels aggressive. If I have to use an adjective, Rajang is aggressive.
Oh yeah.
Alatreon is just like it requires skill. It's tough.
Hmm. Absolutely, absolutely. So, what did you end up using on uh, Alatreon?
Oh, okay. So good question there too, because I was entirely expecting to take on Alatreon and Fatalis at Master Rank 100. It's by sheer like fluke and curiosity I actually took them on at Master Rank 84 or lower. I think that's what I did.
Okay.
So that means I did not have access to the top of the line weapons in the game. I did not have access to the augments, a lot of the augments that unlock at Master Rank 100. I took him on with the Barioth Switch Axe,
Okay, nice.
um, and I was able to get one one health augment on it. So that was the weapon. My armor was a mix of there was 3 pieces of Teostra on there,
Got you.
and the chest piece was the Raging Brachydios, and the legs were oh boy, what's it called? The screaming bird that looks kind of weird.
Um,
I'm terrible with names.
Screaming bird. That looks kind of weird.
Jan
Young Garuga?
Ruga.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's the one.
there you go. That's a perfect way of describing it. But yeah,
So
that
yeah,
I mean, it sounds like this was something that you weren't even expecting to. You were just kind of like going in to be like, oh, I'll try it out and see how it goes. Were you entering this saying like, okay, I'm gonna try this until I beat it, kind of thing? Like, I don't care if I have to be going at it for hours and hours and hours. I'm gonna beat it tonight, right now.
well, it actually took me 3 weeks first. And when I went in with this armor set, I
Gotcha.
went in with the sole curiosity. So I did a bit of research because I knew that the fight was quote unquote a little bit more gimmicky. It's not the type of fight that you just go and hack and slash and dodge. It's
Correct.
you gotta know about the elemental damage. You gotta know about the horn breaking. You gotta know about the cycling of elements. So
Mm-hmm.
I had done that research and I learned that the critical piece was you need there's the damage check on your elemental attack.
Right.
And so I was like, can I even do that? Can I pass the check? And so I had just finished killing Silver Rathalos and Gold Rathian.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, let's go see how we do. And I went in and I didn't know how he attacked. So a lot of it was observing and getting killed and learning what the patterns were.
Right.
And after 2 hours, I think I got my first topple. And that was like a big, like, oh my God, I can
Right.
actually deal out enough damage to do the topple.
Mm-hmm.
So theoretically, I should be able to eventually kill it. So that was the moment where I was like, okay, now we're going to actually like, we're going to commit to this and we're going to try it. And a lot of the chat was also supportive in saying like, yeah, you're getting better. We think you can do this.
Right.
And after that, I actually did a challenge to the community. And I said, here's my gear, here's my loadout. Let's see if you guys can take on Alatreon. And I think we got 20 to 30 submissions of people who sent in screenshots or videos where they killed Alatreon with what I had. So I'm like, okay, it's
It's
entirely
doable.
doable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I went in with that. I'm like, okay, now it's just the player that needs to like level up. And so the second week was rough. Like I got better, but I was dying. I was not dealing out enough damage. I was not dodging well enough, so I was carting too many times.
Right. Right.
Uh, the second stream was rough. So I'm now 8 hours of just fighting this dragon, and I'm nowhere near beating it really. And then finally, the third week, I spent a lot of time actually studying myself. Like I was pulling up calculators, understanding if I switched out a decoration, how much more damage does that actually mean? And
Yes. Yes.
asking people like, what are the like, what would you, what can I do? And at this point, people had also recommended 3 other armor loadouts for me. So they had recommended the elemental crit skill from the Silver Rathlos set, the divine blessing skill from the golden rathian set,
Right.
and the Safi set, which gives you that whole thing of dealing out more elemental damage while it
Right.
sucks your life away. So I went out and I tried to grind that, and I grinded the Safi so much, and I'm 1 item short of crafting the last piece of armor. So
Oh wow.
by my third week, I didn't get any of the armor pieces except Gold Rathian. I was like, well, great. The only thing this armor does is it makes me less squishy. It doesn't give more damage.
Right.
And I was like I'll use it as an emergency last resort. So I tried again just this past week with my base armor and everything, and I could feel myself getting better. And I like failed after like a really good run. And like when you get the adrenaline rush, like after the fight, you're all like shaky and sweaty, and you're
Yes.
like you don't
Yes.
want to go back into a fight after that adrenaline. Like you want that to like pass and then go back in. So I'm like, oh, gotta wait for this adrenaline rush to pass. and I'm already again 2 hours into the third stream, and I was like, this is probably the last shot because my own personal stamina drops after about 2 3 hours into a stream. So I'm like, if I can't get him on this hit, like we're
Right.
going to week 4, and I'm fighting him, and we're 30 minutes in. I have enough research on him where people are saying the skull is going to show up in the map now.
Uh-huh.
And so I'm just looking for the skull. 30 minutes in, I'm doing a good run. I'm dealing good damage, the best I've ever like played. And there's no skull. I was like, "Are you serious? Like, am I gonna lose this?" Because at this point, the horns were busted. I went through like 3 or 4 judgments. I'm just like, man, this thing's so hard. I will never beat it. Like I'm playing at my best right now, and I'm still not beating it. And then as all these like negative thoughts were building, eventually like the little victory music like goes off, and he falls. And I'm just like,
Oh.
in disbelief that it actually like I did it, and uh, then then we all just kind of collectively freaked out.
I was gonna
Or
say, man, because even just like you describing the story and stuff like that, it makes me wish that I could go back to when I first took on Alatreon and took him down. Because like I know that I have my streams, where I took on like Alatreon and when I took on Fatalis, and it is such a fantastic feeling taking them down for the first time because it's very very hard, but in the same sense it's so gratifying. And like I've never felt more rewarded in a game after taking somebody down, like a boss, whatever it is. And I've played like Dark Souls, I've played Bloodborne, all that stuff. Even those bosses like Alatreon, Fatalis, and Iceborne, I have not had a better feeling, honestly, than taking those guys down. And the beautiful thing for you and myself, we get to share this experience with so many different people. It's
yeah,
not even us just hanging out, playing, and we get to scream and yell in our room or this or that. Like, we get to scream with 30, 40, 50, hundreds, you know what I mean? Like, especially with your streams, like, you have a lot of people that join in on these hunts. So, getting that collective cheer, that's so cool. And
I
I'm,
I was gonna say I can't imagine like if I was alone on my couch and after like a month of just playing by myself, I finally got it and just been like screaming into like the nothingness of like just yes by myself. But
right.
actually, I did that too. Like before this, my harder challenges, I used to play a lot of Hollow Knight, and I don't know if you've played
Yes.
some of the bosses in Hollow Knight have that similar feel where
Very much.
just in the 2D space, and a lot of them I did like beat them after a lot of time, and I was alone. I was like, you look around and you're like, did anybody else see that? And
And it
of
doesn't,
course,
you know what I mean? Like, even when you're alone, it doesn't take it away any of the joy and just like, oh, finally, that you get. Because it's funny that you said Hollow Knight, because I just recently did a playthrough of that, because kind of like, not so much in the same way as you, but it was my community that told me like, you need to try this game out. And I did. And man, you're spot on with some of those boss fights. They are it, and exactly what you were saying with Alatreon, like how it was hard, but you never were saying like, oh, that's bullshit. They
yeah,
did such a perfect job of making sure that you had clear openings, and things that you have to do this with that. And even with Hollow Knight, like having the different charms and stuff that you can put in, it's a different play style. And they made it to the point where you can do this multiple ways, but you're never going to feel like they did something that was cheap or this or that. They did a very very good job of that. Which, by the way, speaking of that, do you think we are ever going to get Silk Song? Do you ever think it's going to happen?
I do think we're gonna get it. If anything, it just makes me feel better the fact that it's been delayed so much.
Yeah.
I love that they're not pretending like everything's okay and that
Right.
development is smooth. This is a small team of, they're fair, like Hollow Knight was their first game, really.
Right. Team Cherry.
Um, yeah, and they clearly know what they were doing, despite it being their first go. And now the bar is set higher than ever, right? They've got
Right.
that fan base. They've got and it's really hard to meet that expectation. So I'd rather just, they gave us the tease. We got the tease 2 years ago.
Right.
We saw the gameplay.
Hmm.
Like it's very much in the same vein as Hollow Knight, just with different, like a different character.
Right.
And it's like, you know what? You guys do what you got to do, and I trust that team of like when it's ready, it's ready. They're not gonna like. I'd rather that than let's say the No Man's Sky situation of, oh, it's gonna have this and this and this, and
Right.
then it launches and you're like, what?
And it undersells big
Yeah.
time. And see, I agree 100%. As far as like on the stance of delaying games or putting out an unfinished product, I think we can all agree that delaying is the way to go. But I see how it's kind of like like a rock and a hard place situation to where if you release the unfinished game, you're going to get flack for that, and then you patch it up later. Even if it ends up being a pretty solid experience, you're still going to get flack for releasing that unfinished game. But then you're also going to have the angry people if you delay it. So it's just like I don't envy them in a
Oh,
lot of ways. You know what I mean? Because you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't, kind of thing.
for sure. And also keep in mind, the type of game it is. If you remember, have you completed Hollow Knight, or are you like
Oh
in the
yeah,
midst?
yep, completely done, and the absolute radiance was
Absolute
yeah,
pain.
yes, absolutely.
So if you're, well, my experience with Hollow Knight was the greatest thing about that game. When I picked it up, I just picked it up on recommendation. I knew nothing about it.
Okay.
And that sense of discovery, I don't know if you had how much of it you had spoiled, but the fact that like you're all you're doing is you're going in this underground like civilization. You don't know anything. Nobody's talking to you. It's just
Right.
kind of dark, eerie, and all you're doing is exploring. So the I'd say one of the greatest features of Hollow Knight, outside of its difficulty and its mechanics, is that sense of exploration, and I think that resonates with a much wider audience. So the more that you put in trailers and tease, I feel the more you lose of that, especially for players who
Absolutely.
are familiar with Hollow Knight. I'd rather just like I'm already sold on it. You
Yes.
just give me a price point and a release date, and I'm buying it. So the less I know, the better. Like I just want to go in blind.
Absolutely. And see how you talked about, we already got that little bit of gameplay. I'm good with that. You don't have to show me a single bit more of the gameplay. If they
Yep.
want to, I mean, obviously things are probably going to change from way back then when they showed us, but still, I would be perfectly fine with no gameplay trailers, no nothing. Exactly how you said, they've already sold me on Hollow Knight 2 on Hollow Knight alone.
Yeah.
So and it's funny too looking at because I was watching I kind of rewatched the Silk Song gameplay a couple days ago, and it kind of feels like Hollow Knight is kind of like that world Iceborne, and now Silk Song's going to be Rise with all the high flying and
Oh, good point. Yeah.
maneuverability and stuff. I'm very excited to see where Silk Song goes because if it's anything akin to that, that comparison that I just made, Monster Hunter, the thing that I love about it is they are so good at introducing a mechanic or doing this to kind of change the way you play, but the game is still the same at its core. There's people that do not like the clutch claw, and there's people that probably don't like the wire bugs so much, but when it comes down to it, you can still enjoy those games because the core of it is still there. You still
Yeah.
have your same weapons, and if you're a longsword maiden then, you can still be a longsword maiden now, and they just do a very good job of keeping things interesting but sticking to who they are.
Yeah. The core is there, but you get different flavors. That's kind of like how I've always seen, because I was playing World and Rise at the same time,
Right.
and I kept saying like, oh, I prefer this in World, or I prefer this in Rise. Um, they're just two flavors of the, if you like chicken, one is like spicy habanero, and the other one is like a sweet chili or something.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I do have to ask, do you have like a favorite monster? And I'm talking about it doesn't have to be like your favorite fight. It could be a combination of everything that you like, the fight, the design of the monster, its weapons, whatever. Do you have like a monster that kind of is like
I
number one in your heart?
I have a few.
Okay.
I have I it's hard to like rank them against each other just because they all hold different places.
Right.
Like in Rise, Tetranodon is my favorite. I always go to him. I just
Oh,
love
great
my
choice.
chunky boy.
Great choice.
Great design. Just like I don't know, he's big, he's chunky, he's funny when he moves, I guess.
The
And
sumo
the
boy.
fight is fun too.
Right, right. And just getting swallowed up and everything. I love monsters with like unique mechanics and this and that. It just things that make them unique. And that with Tetranodon, definitely love that. So he's your Rise boy. What about like World Iceborne?
So in World, I have a soft spot for Anjanath because he was
There
my
you go.
first adrenaline rush.
Same, same.
Yeah. So every time I see Anjanath, whether it's Rise, World, or even in stories, I'm like, ah, my Anjanath. Like he feels like my pet dog now because he doesn't scare me. But I remember I used to be terrified of him. Um, so yeah, Anjanath holds a special spot. But like Zinogre was also he was a big wall for me in Rise, and like
For
his
sure.
music to me is really iconic. And he was
Absolutely.
also my final boss in Rise because like the final monster I hunted was the Apex Zinogre,
Okay.
and he like Zinogre made me fail quests and was carting me left and right constantly through my playthrough of Rise. So like I
Oh
really
yeah.
struggled with that thing.
Yeah, and see that's the thing is that I do have to say, do you well, I'll ask this first. Do you have any kind of plans to go backwards in the series at all? You know, like the Generation Ultimate and like maybe revisiting 4U and 3U. Do you have any plans on doing anything like that?
Yeah, so in terms of Monster Hunter, when they're gonna add content to Rise, I'm gonna do that.
Right.
I've jumped into stories too on Saturday mornings. I stream that,
Oh, I love it. Love it.
and so I've got my plate full of Monster Hunter, and I'm like, okay, I need to like step a little bit away from it. I don't want to
Right.
overindulge in Monster Hunter, so I'm actually starting my Dark Souls journey, which is another franchise I left on the shelf, and I said it's BS. I'm not touching this.
Oh, yeah, I can't wait for
Um,
that.
so that starts next Tuesday. I'll be streaming it. My first time I start with Dark Souls Remastered. So I'm going to go through that, and then this fall I'm going to do a quick Metroid marathon to celebrate Metroid Dread, and then
Oh,
I'm going to
another good
go
one.
back to Generations Ultimate. I'm going to go see what the old world is all about.
Ooh, baby. So you were talking about Apex Zinogre.
Mhm.
I do want to say this. Okay, I love the fact that they, introduced Apex monsters into Rise and everything, but if you think Apex monsters were a kick in the ass, just wait until you get to Generations Ultimate and you get to face the true deviants, my friend.
I- I've heard of this.
Woo!
I think it's a Bloodbath Diablos.
Yeah, Bloodbath is something intense, but even how you were talking about Apex Zinogre,
Yeah.
Thunderlord Zinogre is absolutely no walk in the park.
Oh boy,
He
that sound. And the
he
mechanics are worse too, aren't they? Like I heard the quality of life are worse in Generations.
yeah. I mean, like as soon as you get back into the 3DS area, you start to
Mm.
see that drop in like the quality of life. And I mean, they made big leaps from like Generations Ultimate to like World and Iceborne and stuff. They made big improvements when it comes to quality of life. But I will say that in Generations Ultimate, it's not bad enough to the point where it's like unplayable or anything like that. It's definitely not to that point. And I promise you, if you thought there was plenty of content in like World and Iceborne or, Rise,
Mm.
Generations Ultimate, I think, might be the most content dense Monster Hunter that there is. 4U has a lot as well, but Generations Ultimate, especially with the Deviant system, it has a lot of stuff for you to do. And speaking specifically towards the Deviants, they even have like what is called, have you heard of like the EX system with the Deviants?
No.
So basically, you fight through different levels of difficulty with the Deviants, and then you unlock the EX Deviants.
Mm.
Those are basically like, those are pretty much like I would say the end game of Generations Ultimate.
It
You
sounds like a lot of bullshit.
oh oh listen, man, listen. I think the one that I did on live stream was Deadeye Yon Garuga, and wow, like every single move that he has is close to a one shot, if not a one shot. And that's kind of like what the theme is with the EX is like, okay, you got to play this perfectly, very minimal mistakes. And it's peak Monster Hunter, in my opinion. You
And
know,
there's Hull here in chat mentioned too. There's no restocking either, right? Which is
correct.
something I rely heavily on in World and Rise.
True, true. But I will say that playing Generations Ultimate has definitely made me a better hunter overall. It's made me more tactical, more patient, more aware and observant of monsters, even though it was like a 3DS game. I assume you're going to be playing on the Switch.
Oh yes,
Yeah, I was going to
absolutely.
say that's definitely a must. But yeah, I
I
mean the way that they ported it and it's great. It is really really good. You still have a bit of the clunkiness because it is a 3DS game, but outside of that, you definitely won't get frustrated with that. It won't be to the point where you had with like Try and For You and stuff. You won't get to that point. I can guarantee you that. You'll notice things, but you'll have a fantastic time. I can promise you that.
well, I'm reassured by the fact that I'll have two Monster Hunter games under my belt by the time I get to it.
Right.
I'll have Dark Souls under my belt, and like
Mm-hmm.
the community has embraced Generations Ultimate in pretty great numbers. Like I would say everyone that's the one everyone's pointing me towards trying next. It's
Right.
like a lot of thousands of other people have done it, so it's doable. So I'm sure I can probably do it. But as you say, it will probably force me to become a better player and hunter, just through its system and limitations.
Absolutely. And see that's the thing too is that I know that somebody was just saying in the chat that it was kind of like, well, very epic was saying that it's a perfect balance of flashy fast combat and like slow methodical fighting. That's a perfect description because you have different styles with weapons that what would you say is a weapon that you definitely dislike?
That I dislike. Oh
Yeah.
boy.
That you just have like no desire to really go back to and try.
Um, Geez, because my opinion keeps changing on all of them.
Right.
Insect Glaive.
Insect Glaive? Okay, okay.
Yes.
So in like Generations Ultimate, you have styles to where it can pretty drastically change how a weapon works. So, for example, with with the Insect Glaive, if you choose, I believe it's the aerial style, instead of doing, how you do your vault and kind of launch up into the air.
Roughly, yeah.
Well, with this, it changes your vault to like pretty much like a slingshot. So you kind
Oh,
of just like, you know what I mean? So you kind of just like shoot forward. So it's different things like that to where it changes some weapons enough to where even if you disliked it, you should probably give it a try and try out the different styles and see if there's something that, kind of makes you think, hey, you know what? I'll go ahead and play this and give it a try. Or, oh, I like that. There might be something that you hate about a weapon that you change the style and it'll either, minimalize it or completely take it away to where you can enjoy it in a different way.
would you say that's similar to the switch skills in
Yes,
Rise?
very much so. And see, that's the thing. You see a lot of similarities with Rise and Generations Ultimate because of
Hmm.
that. But how Generations Ultimate does it is you have your styles and then you have what they call hunter arts.
Oh,
And yeah, with like varying levels, like some skills have like or some arts have like a 1, 2, 3 version. And basically, you slot those in. And then as you go into the hunt, when you like hit the monster, things like that, your art gauge will fill up. And then once your art gauge is filled up, you can use that art. So with the different weapons, some have really really good hunter arts, some not so much. Hunting
hmm.
horn, is a weapon that I love when we're not talking about the Rise version. I love it in the old world and in Iceborne, but with Generations Ultimate, it doesn't have great arts, so I tend to not worry about that as much. But then when you talk about Sword and Shield, it has insane hunter arts. So like it has one that kind of makes you invulnerable. It's like the round slash. So like you can just literally eat any attack and it
Mm.
charges up very fast. So you typically use what's called like the striker style because you can equip more hunter arts than the others. So you
Right.
see, as far as like what I'm talking about, like we've been just sitting here talking for a couple minutes, and I'm sure this is just like an overwhelming amount of stuff already. And
Yeah,
that's just a brief intro, you know. So you are definitely going to be in for a different experience, but like I said, it's still Monster Hunter, you know.
yeah, and I'm really looking forward to. I want to try new weapons. So when I started Rise, I tried to switch to the Charge Blade, but I think I was still too early, like in my Switch X. I was only maybe 50, 60 hours into World with Switch X gameplay.
Okay.
And I have to, like, in hindsight, I don't think I was ready to move away from the Switch X because I ended up switching back to the Switch X from the Charge Blade. And in Rise, it's really like in the last couple weeks where I feel really like one on one with my weapon. And even in World, that I would say happened almost last week as well. So
Okay.
I'm only just now feeling very comfortable with the Switch Axe, where I think now is the time that it's like, okay, I can probably move and try a new weapon. So probably with Generations Ultimate, I will. I would love to be able to pull out. I know a lot of people play longsword, but I
Okay.
love how it looks. I'm like, I want to look like that when I'm hunting.
Yeah, longsword. It has never really gotten the short end of the stick, or you know what I mean. Like it really has never been from like from an entry to the next. It's never really gotten like worse. Maybe outside of I lied. Maybe outside of like 3U to 4U, there was like some different things with like the spirit gauge that happened, but in pretty much every game with Monster Hunter, you can pretty much rely on Longsword being a very good choice as far as like being powerful and you know being out. If you land this, it's going to be great, but it does require a decent bit of skill too with some of those windows, like the counters and everything. They are
Yeah.
pretty tight. They are very, especially I believe it's the Valor longsword that has a I think it's a counter on the very first Spirit Slash. The window's really, really tight, but if you can get it, whew, it is.
Well, it's that rush, right? You get that
Yes,
rush of using it. And
yes.
I've just happen to love, well, I love the style, and it kind of reminds me a bit of Ghost of Tsushima, which, that is, it's all katana play, and the longsword seems to be influenced by the katana.
Mm-hmm.
So in Ghost of Tsushima, I don't know if you've played it, but that too is, the combat is very dependent on timing, although it's very
Okay.
generous in its window.
Right.
Um, but it's all about kind of anticipating your opponent's attack, parrying, deflect, and then like you kill. So I do like that. I love the combat in Ghost of Tsushima, and I imagine Monster Hunter just takes that to like a whole other level of precision and execution. So
Yeah. I do. We're gonna go ahead and keep talking about the longsword, but I do want you guys in the chat. If you have things that you want to ask, hey Jay, by all means, go ahead and type those questions because I only got this man for about an hour, so I want you guys to be able to ask what you want to ask as well. But as far as the topic of longsword, so you haven't tried it like in Iceborne or Rise yet, or have you
I,
just
I
not been able
tried
to?
it. I tried it in like a multiplayer stream, but it would have like severely set my progress back to switch weapons. So like I played around with it a bit. I did the homebreaker move. Um, and I was like, "Oh, this is cool," but it was definitely not fluid to me. Like I would have to spend a lot of hours
Right.
to relearn a new weapon, and because I was already like I'm already taking in so much new information from the Switch Axe, and as I was progressing through Iceborne, like I was still learning new things. I was still learning like decorations,
Right. Right.
just every week it was something new that I didn't want to take my attention away and learn a weapon. But now that I'm 200 hours into World Iceborne, 70 so hours in Rise, I'm like, okay, now I can start investing in other weapons because I feel that I've actually absorbed the main mechanics of the game to actually do like the hunts.
Right, right, right. Because that's, I mean, you are, just getting your feet wet, with the series, period. So
Yeah.
yeah, I agree. Getting the things down like decorations and stuff like that, that's definitely a good first step. But as far as learning a new weapon, do you ever just kind of like go solo and try to learn the weapons, or do you usually just like jump in to a stream and start trying to figure out how it works and kind of like like have the chat tell you, okay, like, so how do I do this kind of thing? Because I've done that plenty of times.
I would say to much to maybe to chats like cringe or whatever. I always do it online. So like I did one recently where I tried to learn the what's it called, the gun, the heavy gun, I think
Heavy
the one with
bowgun.
the heavy bow gun. And we spent an hour with it, and honestly I felt so dumb. Like it was an hour of training, learning about ammo. Like that's a whole different weapon too, of like you have to actually learn about a whole different inventory system. I ended up doing like one Grey Jaggers hunt just to get the feel for it, and
Right.
like we it took me an hour just to learn what I had to do before I got into the hunt. And I was like, well, this I don't think this is like interesting for people on stream to be watching. So I'm like,
Got
one
you.
hour of that is enough. And then
Uh-huh.
I went back to Switch Axe and I went back to progressing as normal.
Right, right, right. Yeah. And I was going to say, on the topic of heavy bowgun, just wait till you get to play it in Generations Ultimate. It has a beautiful, beautiful mechanic that I have no idea why they took it away. But basically, it's siege firing. So what happens is each heavy bowgun has like a specific ammo in it, internal ammo that it can fire off. Like literally, you just hold the button and it'll start firing off like a machine gun at varying speeds depending on the ammo. But yeah, so they have siege mode, and so you could imagine things like pierce ammo, being able to siege fire that, even spread ammo, being able to just kind of like fire that off like a machine gun. Definitely give
Yeah.
heavy bowgun a try in Generations Ultimate. But something that Moldy was asking about stories too. I absolutely would love to hear your thoughts on stories too so far.
I love it.
Yes.
I grew up like my teen years was spent on JRPGs,
Right.
and I have not felt like what I felt when I used to play those games. So we're talking Final Fantasy 4, Final Fantasy 6,
Yes.
7, Chrono Trigger,
Oh, Chrono
um,
Trigger.
Chrono Cross, like that era of JRPG.
Absolutely.
When I picked up Monster Hunter Stories 2, I felt that from like it felt like one of those games with polish for the modern era with its its animation style, its
Yes.
music,
Yes.
it's the way that it feels and the turn-based aspect. And I keep saying like I keep seeing similarities to Chrono Trigger in Stories 2.
Absolutely.
And I keep saying like, oh, this reminds me of Chrono Trigger. This reminds me of Chrono Trigger. So I almost see it as Chrono Trigger's like cousin in a way. So that married with the fact that I'm living this new franchise universe, and it's an awesome year because there's two new games. There's like a new
Right.
movie or a show. I'm not sure what the Netflix thing is.
Legends
Like,
of the Guild.
yeah, there's so much stuff coming out in this universe, and I'm actually at the point where I'm like, oh, I know what that means. I know the reference of that. I
Right.
see a Downey Crake, or I see like this monster being used to like carry passengers. I'm like, oh my god, I know. Like it's so just cool to see this universe from an aspect where you're not just killing families of monsters out of nowhere, and you're like
Right.
seeing it from a different. So I'm loving Stories too, and it's really hard to not play it off stream because I only play it on
Yes.
Saturday mornings.
Listen, I have that problem all the time. Literally, I feel bad, but I ended up doing the final boss off stream just because I could not put the controller down. But yeah, I'm so happy to hear that you love stories too. And the JRPG comparisons were fantastic because it does. It gives me like almost like back to the Super Nintendo era of JRPGs that I got to play. And it's a fantastic game. I'm glad that it's getting the recognition that it is. So hopefully this is something that they'll continue. As far as stories too, do you have any monsties? Which I'll be honest, I hate the word monsties. Do you have any monsters that you're enjoying using the most, or anybody that is like kind of your favorite right now?
Not yet. I'm not very far. I just made it to the second town.
Okay,
So my Monstie option is quite limited.
right.
I've got what am I writing that I enjoy? Honestly, I don't like even enjoy any of the Kulu's probably the best I've got so far
Okay, okay, yeah,
because
yeah,
just because he's so derpy, but
right.
like no one else is really like Renmar, I think, the blue dino, like I
Yeah,
don't really have because I don't think they're in Rise or World, so I have no connection to that.
no, Velocidrome. Yeah,
And then the other ones we've got a Yan
Cutku.
Kutku, I think
Yep.
Kutku. That too, I don't think is in Rise or World.
Nope.
So I have no emotional connection to these monsters, but it's cool to like discover new one. Like I just ran into an Arzuros. I was like, I know this one. Like every time I see a monster I recognize, I just feel like I'm seeing like an old friend. Like, oh, you're in this game too, and then I kill them.
Uh huh. Okay, I want to go ahead and ask you. Raditz had a great question. Do you have a favorite monster theme?
Um, I think the choice response is always to mention Kezu as my favorite.
Oh, okay. We're going to that territory. You
uh,
are officially a part of the Monster Hunter community for making that joke.
I understand the memes. Well,
Yes.
most of them. I have to say, I think Zenogre is probably like the theme song I will always hum in my head.
Right.
I'm trying to think if there's another one. I know some people mentioned Valstrax, and we haven't talked about Valstrax because I've only fought him once so far.
Okay.
That's a really like that's one of my favorites too. I think I just need to see him a few more times. I love everything about Valstrax.
And that's another one in Gen U that you're going to love too. He's very good in Gen U as well.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Mhm.
I'm trying to think of like monster themes that I would really throw out to you that you might enjoy. I know that it's not one that gets said a lot, but I am very partial to Nargacuga, but one that always plays and I just enjoy it and smile. Rajang, I love it. I absolutely love that theme, and it just
It's the best thing about that monkey is its song. That's it.
That's true. That's true. That's true. So, as far as like stories too, do you have any monster that maybe isn't in the game right now that you might hope to see?
So I've been good at avoiding spoilers. So there's a lot of like, I might say one, and you guys might be like, "Well, that's actually in the game."
Okay, so don't do that.
Um,
By the way, if he says, "Oh, I hope blah 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 is in the game," do not say if they are in the game. Don't say it. Don't say it. But
right. So I mean, I got to ride Valstrax a bit in Rise, and that was cool. Like to be on a jet engine. So if you could ride Valstrax in stories, I mean, that would be super epic.
and we're
Um,
never gonna tell.
I'll know in like 80 hours.
There you go.
Uh, so yeah, I think he's like the coolest. And of course, it's always just cool. Like I've got like this thing going with like Rathian, so I like writing. I'm pretty sure a Rathian's in there. It'd be a shame not to see a Rathian. Um,
Right.
writing
Um,
Rathian or Rathalos.
I was gonna say I'm sorry it went pretty far up in the chat, but somebody was asking graphic style wise, as far as like stories to Rise and like Iceborne,
Oh,
do you have like a preference or one that you like the most?
I was gonna just be like worlds hands down, but then you said stories in the mix.
Uh huh.
I would love to see a Monster Hunter like in the style of stories, but a traditional Monster Hunter, and by traditional I mean like World or
Ooh,
Rise.
yes.
Um, I love that cell shaded style, but when it comes to the more traditional Monster Hunter experiences, World has the epic feel, which I really love.
Yes.
And honestly, like I really don't like the look of Rise
Same.
because
Same.
I got used to World, and I'm just like, I want my monsters big, I want them epic,
Mm-hmm.
and I want this cinematic. Like I play it on my PC, right?
Right.
So I'm kind of hoping like Rise will get an upgrade when it comes to PC, just like on the physical or the graphics side of things. But
Right.
we'll see.
Right, right, right. Yeah, and I know that as far as you were talking about like the epic, I feel like there's a lot of things in like World in Iceborne that I feel like I'm never going to forget seeing it for the first time. Like I don't know if you remember fighting Namiel for the first time and you had that just that black emptiness and then the lights
Hmm.
on her wings just like lighting up and then her face coming into the front. I will never in my life forget seeing that for the first time. That might be my favorite cutscene in a Monster Hunter game, period. But I
What I
agree with you big time on that.
And the format of introducing monsters I preferred in World, where
Yes,
a lot of
yes.
the times I went into maps and I didn't even know what I was hunting. They're like, go fight a Glavenus. I was like, what is a Glavenus?
Uh huh.
And so all you got is like a little like emoji to go by. I'm like, okay. So then you're going in the wild and you're looking for this emoji and you're like, what is this gonna look like?
Uh
And
huh.
then like you just hear a roar, you turn around and then like cutscene, right?
Right.
Whereas in Rise, it's like, here's a quest, go do it. And then you get like
The intro.
the little poem at the beginning. You're like, oh,
Right.
that's what it looks like. Let's go fight it.
Yeah, and you know what? I never even really thought about that, but yeah, I mean that's a much better way of introducing monsters is, okay, let's go ahead and have you go find this thing and
Hmm.
then you get that cutscene when you get to the right area and stuff. But yeah, I guess I was just already, spoiled with that with Iceborne to where I already went through that, and then the intros itself, since I'd already seen a lot of the monsters that were in it, it didn't really phase me as much. So yeah, I mean that's definitely a good way of looking at it, and I hope in future games they take a little bit of time to do that. The organic way of introducing the monsters, like you running into them, because some of those were my favorites. Seeing your hunter duck down behind the rock and Valhazak just walking by and seeing that giant flesh rotten dragon. It's fantastic. Honestly, it's great, and I hope they go back to it as well.
Yeah, I think back to, oh, which monster was it? There was one, the Rathalos. So my first encounter with Rathalos was, so this was before I even knew what a Rathalos was.
Right.
I was walking around the forest in World, and it wasn't even a quest to hunt a Rathalos. I think I was looking for a, I don't know, something minor. And I was in a meadow where there's like those cows, whatever they're called, and I'm just like walking around and being silly,
Right.
and I just see a massive shadow on the floor, like where I am. I'm just like, whoa, what is this? And as I look up, it's Rathalos coming down to like swoop in and eat one of those like dino cows. And like he yells, and I literally like I freaked out. I was like, "Oh my god, this thing's gonna attack me! What is this? It's a massive like." At the time, I called him a dragon. Then I learned the difference between dragons and wyverns.
Right.
Uh, and then I just like booked it and ran away and watched from behind a rock what was going on. But like, you would never get that in Rise because you get the little poem, and then it's like go off, and all the monsters kind of like, even when they introduced Rajang as an invader in Rise, like the first time I came across Rajang, he's sleeping on a rock with like his legs spread apart. And I'm just like, oh, how far you've fallen, monkey.
Oh yeah, that is the truth. I mean, I, every single time I hear the word invader or anybody's talking about invaders, like Basil is the first thing that comes to mind. That just the epicness of when you first get to encounter a Basil and he just drops in, like just so good. And I see exactly what you're talking about as far as like how far they've fallen. In your opinion, because I know that you kind of did it at the same time. Would you say that Rise is? I guess I should ask first. Do you think Rise is easier than Iceborne, or even World?
Well,
Even talking about base
well,
World.
uh, it's really tough because I got a lot of my challenge out of Iceborne, and I was playing base world when the game was fully like fleshed. So it
Right.
definitely Rise felt easier at the beginning for sure. And
Okay.
then I met Zenogre and I got slapped around. And I was like, oh, this game's serious. But
Yeah.
like I was in village rank and I was getting slapped around by Zenogre. I think the two games have their own challenges to offer.
Hmm.
Um, I think it'd be interesting to ask like a new player where Rise is their first game,
Right.
because World was my first game, so I had a lot of learning to do. But then those skills carried over to Rise,
Right.
and all of you who've been playing longer, you all have been transferring skills from game to game to game, only getting better. Um, but overall, I think because there are more mechanics in Rise, it might feel easier. The fact that you can ride a monster in and do a lot of damage that way. The fact that you can wire bug out of trouble and you can avoid
Right.
kind of a 1-2 combo.
Yeah.
Um, and the fact that everything's faster. Like I have to say, I was wishing the Switch Axe was what it was in Rise was in World. Like I'm like I want to play with the Switch Axe the same way in World that I do Rise, because it just felt so fluid and quick.
Right.
But so the games have pros and cons.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. But yeah, so I'm just very, very glad that we got the opportunity to have the conversation, and I don't want to keep you too long, but yeah, so do you have anything that you are looking forward to gaming wise down the line? Like I guess maybe like the Steam Deck. Have you looked into that at all?
Well, I don't like handheld gaming, so
Right.
I probably won't be getting it. What I'm most excited for next is the Dark Souls adventure, because I'm at the point where I remember when I started Monster Hunter, I knew nothing. And what I loved the most was as I was playing, people would say, I can't wait till he meets. And then, like, you would refer to them in code names, whether it was like B-52 or
Right.
Clifford, and I was like, what does that mean? What does that mean? And just this whole unknown. And now I've kind of lost that because I'm so familiar with the franchise. I kind of
Right.
know a good chunk. But now I'm going into Dark Souls with that same unknown where I don't know the bosses. I don't know anything about that universe. I don't know any, like, I'm going into the unknown again, and like getting that excitement of just not knowing what I'm going to experience on stream. I'm super excited for that. And like that's just around the corner. So I'm like actively seeking out these experiences now.
Right, right. And you said that's starting Tuesday, correct?
Uh, yeah, so it's supposed to start tomorrow, but something came up, so it's going to be starting next
Next
Tuesday
Tuesday.
on 27th. Yep.
Okay, and you stream Twitch on Twitch now, right?
Yep. So I stream. So Dark Souls is Tuesdays 8 p.m. Eastern time, and I'm going to continue my Monster Hunter World Iceborne plays until I get through Fatalis Thursdays at 8 p.m. Eastern time, and then I do Monster Hunter Stories 2 Saturday mornings at 8 a.m. Eastern time.
Got you, got you. So I do have to say, as far as the Dark Souls go, um, Dark Souls 2 is a little bit of an outlier.
I've heard it was bad.
Yeah, I would have to kind of agree with that. So, oh, I'll ask too. I guess, with your Dark Souls playthrough, is it kind of like a Soulsborne playthrough? So, like, are you going to be trying out Bloodborne at all?
So I really am not confident that I will like this franchise. I have
Oh,
tried
okay.
Dark Souls before. I made it to the Minotaur, I killed it, and then I died to a dragon that flew over me and killed me. I was like, never again. This is bullshit. Um, and then I played Sekiro. I didn't get very far in that. But now the only reason I'm revisiting it is because, well, one, everybody asked me to, but
Right,
two,
right.
a lot of people said my Monster Hunter skills will carry over to that game. I was like, maybe it'll be a better experience now that I'm used to playing with like slower, more precision-based movements and
Right,
combat.
right. And
So that's what I'm curious about.
yeah, and just the idea of patience and how patient you can be in Monster Hunter, like how you were with Alatreon, how patient you were with that. That'll definitely carry over very, very well. And I have to say, if you have anybody that you want to, whether it's lore or anything like that, Ratatosker. He is a content creator. If you want to, get yourself entrenched in the lore of the game, if you think that might help, make it a bit more enjoyable through the playthrough, has fantastic videos on Dark Souls lore and just a wealth of knowledge when it comes to it. So definitely hit him up. He's a great guy. He'll get back to you and everything. So if you ever need a reason to really dive into Dark Souls for some lore, he's your man to go through.
I mean, we'll see how the first stream goes. Like I'm committing to being 4 hours in this game. So
Okay. Okay.
it's either going to be I'll know after I think stream one if if I will love it or like it or hate it.
Okay, so basically it's to the point where it's like 4 hours, do or die kind of thing. Do you have any kind of like
Oh, I'm committed to the credits, so like I'm
okay,
gonna
okay, good, 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 good. I was gonna
yeah,
say because it is, you will definitely find out where the phrase get good comes from and why people say it, but I do think that you're going to enjoy that same kind of gratification and payoff for sticking with it and being patient and trying again and failing, trying again and failing. It's a
yeah,
very good experience. I will definitely say that.
yeah. In my famous words, how hard can it be?
I
After beating Alatreon, how hard can it be?
was going to say, just wait for Fatty, my friend, because he can be very, very frustrating. I will just tell you the little 360 flame spin that he does will probably
Yeah.
get a little frustrating for you, but stick with it, man, because you get just as good of a feeling when you take out Fatalis as you do with Alatreon.
Hmm. Well, yeah, I'm in it to I pledged to do it, so I will hunt that black dragon down eventually. It's probably going to take me, you know, another month or two. I'm actually breaking out my journey and calling this the Fatalis arc,
Oh,
and
okay.
we're just going to focus on like talking about all the different attempts and how to prepare and just every little bit of knowledge I'm getting from every like stream encounter with them.
Absolutely, absolutely. But hey, Jay, thank you so much for taking the time out to have a conversation. I appreciate everybody coming in to the chat. Hopefully, we can do this again sometime. And yeah, it was very fun. Again, sir, thank you for your time.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for the invite. Really love, just chatting about gaming, Monster Hunter, anything gaming. I love talking about it. So thanks for the invite. It was fun hanging out with you and the chat here tonight.
And okay, so I want to end. Go ahead if you want to plug your times for the stream. Anything else you want to get out there as far as plugs, by all means.
Yeah, you can find me everywhere. It's Hey J Official. So that's on Twitter, Twitch. I think YouTube's the only one that's not, but if you can see me here in the chat, just Hey J. Um, and those are the main platforms. Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube is where I encourage you to follow if you want to see any of my adventures in gaming.
All right, guys. Great conversation. Thank you again, and I will see you guys in the next stream. Jay, my friend, thank you so much.